Well, have you seen a change in the types of questions that you're being asked? Because the world has changed, people are more interested in personal branding or business or whatever else. Are people asking you new questions?
No, actually,
Really?
I don't think. Yeah.
What are the questions that you get asked?
I get asked a lot of like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. What do you think? I'm thinking about starting this kind of business. I'm thinking about starting a podcast agency. What do you think? I'm like, it doesn't matter what I think. And so I'll just ask the next question, which is like, well, what have you done so far?
Why did you ask that?
Well, because the answer 9 times out of 10 is, well, I mean, I was just thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well then nothing's happened.
What's going on there with those people that come up to you and they say they're thinking about something, but they haven't done anything about it?
I'm guessing that they want to talk to me about business stuff. And so this is the only business related thing that they can talk about. And so that's probably why they talk about it or they bring it up. Or they want to feel like in some ways it's kind of like productive procrastination, or that I'm going to somehow give them one answer that's going to like finally get them over the hump of starting. But most people start because starting feels like this very amorphous thing. Like, I was supposed to say, like, has there ever been something that you don't know how to do? Well, whenever I approach something that I don't know how to do, it always feels amorphous. It's like this big thing, and I don't know where to start. Like, how do I grab onto a piece of it? And so, having gone and attacked like these amorphous things, like start a business, which actually means nothing, you have to break things down to much smaller steps of action. That's why, for me, the most basic thing to start a business is like get an LLC, open a bank account, have the ability to process money, and then ask a stranger if you can do something for them in exchange for money. As soon as you do those 4 things, congratulations, you're a business owner. You've already beaten like 95% of people and you've also changed your title from wantrepreneur to entrepreneur. And I think that is one of the most, just like when a customer buys from you versus just consuming your free stuff, their identity completely changes. They're now a customer, which means they're far more likely to purchase future things from you than somebody who's not bought something. That's why, ascensions and renewals are much easier than getting somebody to buy the first time, right? And so I think to the same degree for us as entrepreneurs or people who aspire to be an entrepreneur, it's like, go make the first $1. And then as soon as you have that taste of like, oh, this isn't, I actually grabbed the corner of this thing. I understand. I just got to get them to give me money to do something. Or I can build something and then have them buy it from me. And then I have to figure out how to build more of them, right? If it's a thing. But like, that's it at the most basic level. And everything else is just, is confusion.
If you could go back to the starting blocks and whisper something in Alex's ear when he was starting up, advice that would have made the journey easier, more profitable, whatever. What are the sort of layers of advice you would have given him at the starting blocks?
So I've actually thought about this a lot. If I went back in time and I saw an older version of myself, if he appeared in this room right now, let's say 20 years from now is looking at me, my hope is that he would say nothing because it would mean that it worked. Now, if I was going back and let's say that I hadn't taken a step and I hadn't been able to make the jump, what I say in that instance is you have to decide whether you care more about your future than what other people think about your future. Someone's version of you has to die. It's either your desired version of you or someone else's desired version of you. And the thing is you're going to be with you a lot longer than they are. I think everything at the very beginning of entrepreneurship comes down to one thing, which is fear. And justified. It makes sense to be afraid. Like there's a lot of risk. There's a ton of unknown. There's so much stuff that you don't know. But the only thing I can also say is that it also puts you in the exact same position as every other person who started an entrepreneurship. They didn't know. And the only way to know is to start. And to have faith that you will not know the way up the mountain, but as you walk up the mountain, the fog starts to clear. And the fog will always be there, but you'll always be able to see the couple steps in front of you. And so your responsibility is to only take the steps that you can see in front of you. That is it. And then once you take those steps, the next steps will become clear. And I think that's where there's an obsession with knowing the entirety. And it's because we want certainty. We want to know that if we do all of these things, it's going to work. And you don't. You want certainty from a world that will give you none. And if you're uncomfortable with that, entrepreneurship might not be for you.
Yeah.
But I even say that, and I almost regret saying that because I was so risk averse when I started. Like people see the content now or they see you now and you're so confident and great on podcasts. And like, but I'm sure the first podcast you did, you like look at it and you just absolutely cringe, right? I had a video that I put out that was like the first content that I made that I was like reacting to my own first content and it's horrendous. It's horrible. But the thing is that you have to be willing to be cringe. You must embrace cringeness. You will not be cool. It will not look good. You will suck. And everyone will know you suck and you will know you suck. But again, it's, do I care more about their version of me or my version of me? And am I willing to be a work in progress or am I unwilling to do it because I want to keep my current station in life? But the thing is that you're at a local maximum. And there's a desire in you probably, if I'm talking to my younger self, to be at a higher maximum than I am right now. I feel like I'm capable of doing more, but I'm so afraid of risking this tiny little bit that I've built for myself. But the reality is that the only guarantee that you have of all the paths in front of you is that you stay on the current path. You will not get what you want. So there is a chance that you get what you want if you move, but there is zero chance if you stay. And I think those were some of the thought processes that actually got me to take action, was knowing that I for sure guaranteed 100% would be dissatisfied with my life if I had not taken the shot. And then playing out plan B with excruciating detail. And I think that's also one of the big ones for fear, is that like fear only exists in the vague, never in the specific. Also, so does confusion, right? So the fear is I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to fail. Fail's not specific. And then everyone's going to hate me. And then eventually I'm going to get ostracized and die. Like we catastrophize everything because we're evolutionary beings, right? We're mammals. But if you really think, what does failure even mean? I ask someone to buy and they say no. Is that failure? What if I ask another person? What if I ask 100 people? Okay, well, what if I ask 100 people and all 100 people say no? Am I allowed to change what I'm offering? Yes. Okay. So you get another 100 people and maybe one of them says yes. Okay. But even in that period of time where you had the 100 people who all said no to you, and let's say you quit your job and so you have no income. Okay. What are the options available to you? Can you go and sleep on a friend's couch? Can you go back home, eat with your tail between your legs? Well, it's only tail between your legs if you stop trying. If you go home and say, Mom and Dad, I want to save up some capital so that I can extend my runway so that I can go after this big goal. Mom and Dad might be cool. It might be friends. Or maybe 10 friends going together. And because I split a bedroom. So I had a house with 6 people in it. And I split one of the bedrooms with another guy. I paid $400 a month and I had a mattress on the floor and I was never there. But it was just like, I tried to keep my living expenses as low as possible. And I think one of the big ones especially is that people are unwilling to sacrifice their short-term lifestyle and appearances in order to achieve their long-term goal. And so they're handcuffed to their lifestyle. And so you'd be astonished at how little you can actually live on if you try to live on little.
This goes back to the long-term thinking argument as well. Yes. Which is like if you think about your status in 10 years versus today.
Yes. And I'm willing to take this dip.
One thing you said was really interesting, and it dawned on me that most people might not realize this about people like you, which is that you said there's uncertainty all the way up. Yeah. Now, imagine an 18-year-old entrepreneur listening to Alex Hormozi. They're going to be thinking, oh, he's got everything figured out all the way up. And he's no longer living with uncertainty, fear, confusion, ambiguity. He's no longer having to think hard about how to solve a problem because he's got all the answers. Right. But actually, as you described it, in my head, I imagined all of this sequence of almost never-ending doors that all just have a cryptic message on them. And you imagine you go through one door and there's 10 more. And they all have, you go through one, and you're like, okay, this was the right one. And then there's 10 new ones that all have a vague language on them. And you've got to pick which one to go through next. You go through, okay, you bounced off that one. Shit, you took an L, lost some money. You go through another one. Okay, this was the right one. And then there's 20. Actually, your optionality is increasing with the more success you have. So there's more doors and more decisions to make, more uncertainty, which most people don't realize. But actually, as you were saying, I was thinking, fuck, this is exactly what I'm going through now. Like I was up till the early hours of the morning with one of my colleagues yesterday night, and we're just figuring out which door to walk through.
So this is really interesting because the earlier you are on your journey, the more specific the advice is. Because if you do not have a business, the first step is the same for everyone, which is you must start an entity, and then you have to have a bank account so that you can exchange money, and you have to have a way or manner of collecting that cash. Now, of course, you could have cash business, but I would say most people use credit cards now. So you have a processor, a bank account, and an entity. It doesn't matter what business you start. That is the first step. Now, as the business grows, you have more resources. The nature of the business is different. And so the number of doors that are ahead of you are actually multiplied by a huge factor. And so right now, it's actually never easier to know what to do than when you start. Yeah. And so it has nothing to do with you not knowing. Of course, we just said it. It's everything to figure out why you're not doing it. And more specifically, whose voice you're listening to that is not yours, that you are afraid of disappointing, or afraid of their judgment. And if you can identify that voice, and you actually put a name on it, it's not like, oh, what are people going to think? It's not people. It's probably like 2 people. And if you name it, you're like, oh, it's just James and Betty? Yeah. So this is really real. So one, when I was about to sell Gym Launch, it was actually a very hard decision for me. It's super hard. And when I exited, one of the reasons I almost didn't exit was because there was somebody that I knew in my circle, not even like a super close friend, that I realized when I got really clear on whose voice I cared about, I thought that they didn't think that $46 million was enough money. That they wouldn't think it was legit. I'm dead serious. No, that was my legit. It's like,
it's just funny to hear.
He's not going to think I'm legit. It was only when I was like, am I going to not do this and let him control me? Because that's what it is. They control you. And I think when you say it in those terms, it feels like much heavier. Like I'm letting my mom or my uncle or my brother or my coworker, John, control me. Because that's how much I care about this guy's approval. I have to care about my approval more. I want to say this in more detail because I think it's important. The person that you see in front of you is not the person who took the leap to start the business. I belabored that decision for 6 months. I had almost like a pre-canned answer and people were like, oh, so what are you doing with your career? I was like, oh, I'm a consultant, like to do a business school and then someday start my own business. It was like, I could say it in my sleep, But the someday start my own business, when I tried to think a little bit more first principles, I was like, okay, well, in what way is this business school going to help me start a business? And when I looked at the starting salaries of business school, it was like $120,000 a year after you went to a good business school. And then I thought to myself, well, it cost me $60,000 a year and I can't make money during that period. So I'm going to lose 120 for sure. And at the time I was making $50,000, $60,000 a year. And so I was like, so it's $240,000 is my opportunity cost in 2 years. Do I think that I can take the money that I had saved up and in 2 years get to $10,000 a month? I was like, I think I can do it. And so that was part of the reason that I ended up not going to business school. And it was because of a question on the business school test was, how will a Booth MBA help with short and long-term goals? And I just sat there for 3 days trying to answer it. And I realized, I was like, I don't know if it will help my long-term goals.
Interesting.
So, I mean, it's good that they have those questions because it actually forced me to answer it. Now, back to the 6 months, I was probably reading, no joke, a book every 2 days. Because the job that I had high seasons and low seasons. And during low seasons, I basically just read books. And they were almost all self-help books. And I got to this point after reading however many of them that I look back on my life and realized it was exactly the same. And I thought, oh, if I don't do anything, my life's not going to change. And so I had this idea that if I just keep reading these books, somehow my life was just going to change. And that was like one of the realizations that I had. I had the friend who was also in a white collar, job like I was. And every night we'd probably get on the phone for 2 to 3 hours and talk about how we were going to start a business. And I had this IKEA carpet that I bought that was a cowhide carpet. And the spot where I'd walk back and forth was like worn out on the cowhide because of how much I would just pace in my small flat, just going back and forth, just talking about the ideas that I had to start a business. Every time I wanted to start it, I would tell my dad I want to start the business, and he would be like, let's not be unreasonable here. He's like, you've got a good job. He's like, you're following the plan. You did Vanderbilt in 3 years. You had good grades. We're going to do 2 years here. Then you go to one of the top Ivy, MBA schools. Like, you're good. Don't this is part of it. This is part of it, right? I acted with such cowardice that I had to drive halfway across the country before I could call my dad to tell him that I had quit my job and that I was going to start a business. Because I knew that if I had done it while he was there, he would talk me out of it. Because he had already talked me out of it a bunch of times.
Why was he doing that? I learned a little bit about his background over the last couple of days. I've got some photos,
That's right, the OG.
And I think there's context in his own story, which completes the picture.
So whatever people see of my success, I think in a lot of ways what my dad accomplished, the more I think about it, is bigger. My dad fled during the Iranian Revolution. Right. And then he went to go to France to become a doctor, but he didn't speak French. And so he had to try to go into medical school and take Orgo in a language that he didn't understand. And so he failed 2 years in a row. And his brother was like, go to Belgium, start fresh, go to a new place. And so he ended up getting all the way through medical school. And then he met my mother in medical school. And then they came back to the US. Now, his medical degree didn't transfer to the US. And so he had to get a US fellowship in order, or residency or whatever. But no one would take a Middle Eastern guy who had a super thick accent, who was fresh out of medical school, and there was all these US-based people here. And so for 2 years, he ran x-ray slides. He finally gets a residency. And then he decides when he comes back to Baltimore, which is where I'm from, that he's going to, instead of join the practice that my mother had with her father, he was going to go out on his own, which is pretty ballsy, right? He didn't have a foreigner, didn't have anything. And so he asked to find out how much a construction costs for building your own surgery center. And it was like $250,000 then. So it was a lot of money. He didn't have that. And so he looked at all the legal requirements for what it entails to be a surgery center. And then he went to Home Depot and built a surgery center that met all the specs and got it inspected so that he could have his own surgery center in his practice. Then, right as his practice is starting to work, my parents got divorced. They changed the locks on the door because he had like a separate thing. His patients show up and they didn't know where to go. It was an ugly divorce. And so then he's starting his own. And this is when he was talking to me then. So fast forward now. He's like, I've been in practice for, 20, 30 years, whatever. He's like, those years, I didn't even think about them. I think I was like, I feel like I'm not moving fast enough. I feel like I need to do these things. And he's like, dude, a year, 2 years now. He's like, it's nothing. He's like, when you're my age, you're not even remember it. The honest truth of the matter is that I really desperately wanted to prove that I could do it on my own.
Who did you want to prove that to?
I don't know. Everyone. Me, him, the world. I remember being terrified about the idea of winning the lottery. It sounds really weird. When I was in college, I bought a Super Bowl ticket because it was like $1 billion or so. I was like, let's do it for fun, whatever. And I remember having this moment right before the number was going to get called of sheer terror of what if I win? Because I was like, I will never be able to prove that I have the medal, that I can do it. And so, and of course people would say that now, if someone wants to give me $1 billion, I'm happy to use it. Because to be fair though, because I already have the status and the track record that I built this. Mm-hmm. And that's also the reason that like when I started my business, like I didn't take a loan. Like I used my own money that I'd saved because I wanted to be mine and I knew I would know. And I think, yeah, my dad had absolutely perfect intentions. He gave me what I believe to be, for the vast majority of people, probably pretty good advice. It just wasn't the advice that I needed for the goals that I had.
There's an interesting thing because people like me and you make business content and we talk about entrepreneurship a lot. I often wonder if we're leading some people astray in the context of some people actually should take that advice. Some people shouldn't become entrepreneurs. And how does one know if entrepreneurship in its broad definition is for them or not? Or like working in a company, having a great job is for them. It's funny. I was doing this show once and I said to the producer who was just off camera, I said, do you think I'm happy? So this is someone who has seen me for 6 or 7 years behind the scenes every day since we're on my kitchen table. He's been there with me every corner of the world, the best and the worst of times. I went, do you think I'm happy? He went, yes. He said it quickly. And then I said, would you want my life? And he couldn't have said no more violently. So much so that it was almost offensive. He was like, you're happy. And then I went, would you like my life? He goes, no. And he was like, and he was like laughing. He would not want my life, but at the same time thinks and believes, having seen me behind the scenes for 7 years, that I'm happy. And in there, I think you have something, which is the sort of subjectivity of journey. Like, is this your journey? How does one know listening to this now if they should be an entrepreneur or not?
So I'll give a couple of frames because decision making is what probably we both do with a lot of our time. So one is, what's the goal? What do I want to have happen?
Everyone says the same things here. They say, I want freedom to make my decisions. I want, financial freedom.
But then we have to be specific. And so just like fear only exists in the specific, goals have to exist in the specific in order for them to be real and for you to make accurate decisions. And this is why I'm so obsessive about language and like observables and things like that. So what do I actually want to have happen? And then number two, what does that change about my actual daily life?
On this first point, funnily enough, I said to you freedom. And then I immediately realized that the least free person in this is me.
Dude, this is great. So I think about this. It's the freedom to choose. But I think people stop at freedom. There's this almost fetishization of independence and keeping your options open and options maxing, right, for your life. But all of the best parts of life come on the other side of exercising an option and walking through a door. But in so doing, leaving the other doors that you could have walked through behind. And so the secret to getting a life you want is making a commitment. But you will not get all lives you want. And so at some point, you have to sit at the precipice and you have to make a trade. And you have to say, I want this more than something else. That means I know I'm not going to get this. And I choose to say that I want this more. And I think this is where people just sit at the crossroads. And that is what takes the majority of time, not just getting into business, but also when you're in business. People will sit at the crossroads of like, what type of company do I want to build? What type of product? And what type of business do I want? And we sit there and when I see people get stuck, it's almost always unmade decisions. Because unmade decisions can last forever. Whereas if you're in a trial loop of feedback, like you'll figure it out, like you'll move. But if you're in an unmade decision, it can sit there forever. And that's like the freedom to choose. We have to choose.
Are you seeing this sort of new generation that have grown up with all the tools to start their own business? That we're in this personal brand era where everybody can make content and build a brand and then do like panel talks for a living or sell like ads on LinkedIn. What is going on here? This sort of younger generation under 30 now, keeping their options open, wanting freedom. If you compare that to, say, maybe my dad, who, one job, did that career for 20, 30 years of 40 years of his life, it's a very different world we're living in.
There are more people starting businesses than ever before. I know since COVID, there's at least in the US, the stats that I looked at recently, it's like there's been more new businesses per quarter. It's been growing really aggressively, at least in the US. And so more people are starting businesses. And so I think that lowering the cost of entry has gotten more people across the line. I think having more access to information has gotten more people across the line. But why isn't everyone going across the line? I think there's a couple things. One is, to your point earlier, I don't think it is for everyone. And so I think the issue there is one of motivation. They have too many carrots, so good things, keeping them in their current position, and not enough sticks or bad things getting them out of their current position. And I think it's a Tony Robbins quote, which is the pain of staying the same has to be greater than the pain of change. And I think that when that happens, and it could be the pleasure of change has to be greater than the pleasure of staying the same, equal opposite. But I think most people who are in that slice, there's pain. And so you will change the moment it is more painful to stay the same.
Do you think life rewards you somewhat proportional to the hardness of the problem that you solve?
So I think a hard problem doesn't necessarily guarantee that it is a valuable problem. Like if you run a marathon very hard, doesn't necessarily make you more money. So like there's lots of hard things that are out there that will not turn into monetization. The second thing is I think it depends on the size of your goals. And so if you want to be a millionaire, you do not need to solve a hard problem. You just need to do a little bit better than other businesses that are wildly underserving their customers, which I promise you, there are plenty. You can just have a pool cleaning business that just cleans better than the other guy and like shows up on time, and all you got to do is knock on doors and ask if they want to switch because their current company probably doesn't pay attention to them.
One of the things that, a lot of founders, entrepreneurs are thinking about at the moment is producing content. We're living in an interesting time where a kid in Mumbai or a kid in Manhattan can both produce content using LLMs, AI. They can produce videos theoretically. If you imagine any rate of improvement, they're going to be able to make videos, photos, churn out your quotes. They could use your quotes, change them a little bit, and have an agent post them for them. Where is the moat in content? If you think about supply demand dynamics, there's fixed demand. The Financial Times did a report saying that time spent on social media is starting to dip a little bit since 2022 for younger generations.
Interesting.
For older generations, it's still sort of like going up or flat, but for Gen Zs, it's like starting to come down a little bit. So stagnant demand, tsunami slop coming in of AI content.
Yeah.
Huge supply shock. Every unit of content itself is going to become less valuable, therefore. And the algorithms are getting more violent, or I should say, are becoming more. Someone with 10 million followers can get 2,000 likes. Back in my day, 15 years ago, when I started on social media, if you had 1 million followers, you got a million likes, or 1 million views, shall I say. What's the game of content in such a world? Everyone's making content now.
To your point, what's the moat? Reality is the moat.
Reality is the moat.
I'd say the number one biggest business influencer, I think, on the planet is Elon Musk. And he happens to own the biggest business on the planet, be the richest man. Jeff Bezos, huge business influencer because he has Amazon. Warren Buffett, probably the number one investing influencer. Like, people fly around the world, and when he talks, everyone listens. And so even if a teacher in Des Moines, Iowa, word for word quotes Warren Buffett, and let's do one better, let's say makes even better advice than Warren Buffett does, it's still not going to get the same views because they just forgot to build Berkshire Hathaway and have 100 years of track record. And so what I'm saying there is that when reality is the moat, it means that your brand is the moat. It means your reputation is the moat, which can only happen in reality. Now, that said, I do think it's going to affect different types of content differently. If you're in the world of making fictional whatever stuff, then yeah, I think AI is going to hit you much harder. But even then, there's still going to be the standard holder. Somebody has to determine that this slop is too sloppy and that you still have to work really hard to make the AI make exactly what you want and have it at the caliber that you want it to be at.
Have you made any changes to your content because of everything that's going on with algorithms and AI?
Yeah. I'm focused on only doing things that only I can do. Most people can't get hundreds of business owners to fly out in person every month that are all $1 million plus business owners to seek advice on real business problems at 3 million, 5 million, 10 million a year, 500K a year. Most people don't have that. And so I can demonstrate expertise in a live and interactive fashion in a way that other people can't do. I think that live is something that, AI maybe in the future will have some AI avatars that can go live, but at least in the short to medium term, I think live is good. I think IRL, as in like it's actually real people talking, which is, we talked about the Scale or Fail show that we just launched. It's real entrepreneurs and there's stakes involved. I think that is something that is not going to be replaced. But if we think about content on this continuum, all right, let's make this continuum risk. When I say risk, it's the risk that a consumer has in consuming the content and executing on it. And so if we differentiate entertainment and education, is entertainment, the point of the content is to be consumed. It's the only objective of entertainment. The point of education is to change behavior, right? So that's our split. Now, entertainers will get hit harder than educators will. The entertainers that have stakes involved will be able to maintain that moat by still focusing on IRL, real stakes, real stories. Now, in the education world of risk, let's put something that's really low stakes. There we go. So we've got beauty on this side. If I have an AI influencer who does a makeup tutorial, I don't think the risk is super high that if the tutorial is good, that a girl's like going to not use the tip that they made in the thing. I think that's pretty likely. If you go maybe a little bit riskier, let's say I have some personal finance stuff. Well, what's the credit? So the credibility in beauty is beauty. The credibility in personal finance is, do you have personal finances? Right? So who's the number one influencer in personal finance? My opinion, I think it's Dave Ramsey. He also happens to be, I don't think he calls himself this, but I think he's a billionaire. And he's got a massive, I think he's public, $300 million a year of revenue that he's done. And I think there's some other newer age people. I think Vivian Tu she's a personal finance person. I think Erica Kohlberg touches in this. She's the legal gal. Anyways, all this to say, all of them have more credibility. Like if you just start giving out tips on how to save money, there's no credibility. reality. There's no reality. You have nothing to back it up. Now, we keep moving further. Let's say business, where if you make a wrong call, you could lose your business. Here you lose some money. Here you lose a bad day of makeup. So the risk goes up. The riskier, the higher the consequences of being wrong, the more people are going to, I think, double down on credibility of source.
What's interesting is I also heard, as you were describing flying these 100 business owners out to Vegas, is I heard scarce, hard and scarce. And I thought a lot about these two words as sort of the pillars of my own content strategy, which is with an LLM, a kid in Mumbai could churn out a video. But the reason why we have, somewhat of a moat here still is because it is hard to shoot on 9 cameras. It is hard to bring Alex Hormozi here. It is hard to get Alex Hormozi to say yes to doing this. It is hard to get Michelle Obama or JD Vance to say yes to doing this. So it's hard from a production perspective, but also from to accomplish this is hard. And then what you described, I heard a lot of I heard hard and scarce. Who can bring 100 entrepreneurs to Vegas who are all successful in their own right and have them ask you questions? So that's great content for us to watch. It's really impossible to...
Very hard. If I had only had a $46 million exit, I don't know if I would attract the number of entrepreneurs that we do now. But now that we do 250 plus, school's $1 billion plus company, it's like I have credibility that the YouTube, the content, right, is not like I still do business. You know what I mean? We have chains of brick and mortar that we're involved in. I just don't talk about it because it's not relevant for most people.
Let's look at the opposite then as well, just to show people what the opposite of hard and scarce or of this approach is. What types of content should we all kind of stay away from now?
So I think commoditized tips and tricks, when you have no, again, like proof is in the pudding. Reality is the moat. It's basically the opposite of that. So if you are posing, if you are pretending, if you have no proof that you are good at this thing, and again, this is on the education side, then there's I call it the big Vegas wispy. Why should I listen to you? Right? Why should I listen to you? And if you can't answer that question for, I'll say, a prospect, prospective customer, within the first couple of seconds, they'll just listen to somebody else. Because the reason that credibility matters so much is that it's actually lower effort to consume information from somebody who's an authority. And so if I'm listening to somebody who doesn't have proof and I'm listening to investing advice, I have to really think is this true? Does this make sense? If I'm listening to Warren Buffett, I don't have to think that. I'm sure he's right. Now, when someone's like, how do I get into this? You do what no one else can do. Well, if you are getting in, then document the proof of effort. So you can have proof of outcome, just like what we do, right? What you do. But then when you're starting, there's proof of effort. Jimmy's first viral video is him counting to 1 million. It's proof of effort. When you have nothing else, you have time, you have work. If you want to say, hey, I want to get into sales stuff, it's like record your entire day of you selling. And then when you overcome something that's really good, that's real life with real stakes, clip the moment, right? And show yourself. It's like, I took 22 calls today. Let me tell you the best moment. I did a 12-hour day. In 3 minutes, I'll give you the best moments. It's like people want a deal. And so I think about that as a compression of time. And the reason that people listen to the people who are further ahead, who've done all these things, is because we can compress time. You say, hey, you could try and figure this out on your own, but if I can compress 14 years of business advice into 37 minutes, that's a good deal.
Do you know what it reminds me of? 7 or 8 years ago, when I used to have, big clients, Uber, Coca-Cola, whatever, around the world, we used to do a lot of social competitions, social media competitions. And I used to have this mental framework for the perfect competition. And I remember the day that when I first heard of you and you were coming on my show and I was looking through some of your writings and you almost had an identical framework.
Yeah. So the core, so each of the books has one core concept and then it breaks down how to use it, etc. But the value equation comes down to what's the outcome? And some outcomes are worth more than others. If I can help you cut your hair versus I can get you to be in perfect shape is worth more. If I can get you to be a billionaire versus perfect shape, billionaire is worth more, right? So we have outcome, and then we have perceived likelihood of achievement.
Perceived likelihood of achievement. Okay, so this is interesting. Yeah,
it's the inverse of risk.
Yeah.
How likely do I think it is? And then we have, on the downside of this, we have time delay. How long is it going to take me to get the thing? And then we have effort.
Is this
sacrifice?
Is this effort and sacrifice?
No, different. Yeah. So effort is all the things that you have to begin to do as a result of a decision that you don't want to do. Sacrifice are all the good things that you have to stop doing as a result of a decision. So if I get into fitness, I have to stop eating the stuff I like and I have to start eating stuff I don't like. I have to start waking up earlier. I can't sleep in as much. I have to be sore where I wasn't before. And so that's my effort and sacrifice piece. The time delay is, okay, if I can get in shape in 3 minutes versus getting in shape in 3 months or 3 years.
Okay.
The outcome is, am I getting in shape or am I being a billionaire? And then how likely is this to happen? Because on some level, like if I buy a PDF of a fitness program for $19 or I pay $3,000 for a personal trainer to train me in person 3 times a week, my perceived likelihood of achievement of buying the PDF versus the personal trainer is much higher. Now, the effort and sacrifice is actually going to be relatively fixed. But this is the part that goes up. Now, the time delay, if done right, should also be fixed there. But this is what explains the difference in value on a product level. But the value equation works for everything, just like consuming content.
Yeah.
What's my outcome? I think I'm going to learn some shit about investing. How likely is it that I think he can provide value, or if I consume this? Pretty high. What's my time commitment of consuming this? If I'm going to watch a 4-hour video, fewer people do it than a 3-minute video, right? And then you don't really actually have to do any work when you're just purely consuming content. But if I wanted to take action as a result, then that's another part of it.